These are the greatest football moments of the 1980s.
Football in the 80s was a brilliant time.
Salvation. It was the only thing that didn't suck in a decade.
It was a golden era.
What a decade the 80s were.
With great teams.
I mean, they were gods.
Great players.
Michael Van Basten,
Socrates,
Zico,
Michel Platini.
You find every now and again a player that starts doing things that you never seen anybody doing before.
And great controversy.
We were notorious.
That was a nasty challenge by Vinnie Jones.
That was the only way that we knew.
Worst tackle in history? One of the worst tackles, yes.
The 1980s changed the face of football forever.
It was the last time when you could genuinely call it the people's game.
Coming up, the most incredible, shocking and inspiring football moments that helped reshape and redefine the beautiful game of today.
Moments in football, isn't it?
Our first memorable moment takes place at the 1986 World Cup Finals in Mexico. The famous Azteca Stadium was to play host to one of the great games of the decade and one of the most controversial moments in football history. It's the quarter-finals, and England have been drawn against Argentina and its star player, Diego Maradona.
First of all, the first half was very even Stevens. There wasn't a lot between the sides.
The game was to spring to life in the second half, as Argentina took the lead with the help of some divine inspiration.
Really, Maradona actually sort of played the ball in the box and went for a 1-2. And he was kind of running with full momentum. Little Hodgie, instead of kind of clearing the ball at the pitch, he ended up hooking the ball back towards our own goal. And of course, you know, it was totally unexpected that the ball was going to come over then.
The ball dropped almost in front of where Maradona was running into, you know.
I was just going to knock it 2 or 3 yards, get it away from the danger area.
You have this extraordinary sequence of this 5'6" Maradona, this is 6'1" Shilton, both going for this ball. Now, the contrast in height would tell you that it's going to be pretty difficult for the 5'6" to get to that ball with the head before, you know, 6'1" goalkeeper manages to get there with his fists.
Suddenly I realised that he had put it in with his hand. And you just think, right, you know, look round. Suddenly the referee ran up the pitch and the lines ran up and what the hell's going off here?
Moments in football, isn't it? Just a moment where actually you miss it for this match. Both either hitting the ball or hitting the face of Maradona. It could have been done, no problem.
Some people do say, how can a little fella out-jump you and all this? But it wasn't a case of that. It was, I was getting the ball.
I don't think you can blame Shilton for an awful lot in the world, but probably not for that.
His famous phrase was part the head of Maradona and part the hand of God. There is something in that, in the sense that, you know, that there's something about the Maradona legend which he has fueled to a certain extent.
You're talking about blurring the line between humanity and divinity. I don't think there's another footballer who's done it quite as much as he has.
The hand of God. I mean, how can you honestly say that I put my hand up and in my head, a spirit came to me and God was that person who said to me, I can use my hand to knock it in the goal?
I just think it was his way of saying, look, you know, I got away with it, really.
There is a cultural thing here, though, which I think is important to understand, which is in Argentina, it's the gauchos, it's the cowboys, which is that, you know, if you can do something that brings you great gain and fame, and you get away with it. What they celebrated was, we got one up on you lot, you know. This is Falklands, you know, as Malvinas almost regained there and then.
Maradona followed up his hand of God with a goal of immense skill, knocking England out of the tournament.
A moment of sheer, sublime genius.
Maradona would ultimately lead Argentina to World Cup glory. But even today, some still find it hard to forgive and forget.
To my generation, he cheated us out of the World Cup. It's just a shame.
Next to Spain, and a footballing giant that was to reawaken in the 1980s and set a path to global glory that continues to this day. The legendary Real Madrid had been suffering a decline in fortunes until the arrival of 5 homegrown Spanish players.
1985 comes along, and then what you have there is this new generation of players. They'd been playing as part of the youth team and also of the B team, Castilla, and who were all playing together. They became the legendary Quinta del Buitre.
Quinta meaning generation, Buitre short for Butragueño.
I mean, Butragueño in a sense was the key player of those 5 because he scored a lot of goals. He was incredibly skillful, and they went into a sort of winning streak with Michel as well, with Sanchez in defence, Padreza and Vasquez. You know, they were the sort of the 5, the magnificent 5 as they came to be known.
Historically, the club or the team has its own style. Real Madrid plays to win and plays to dominate the match, always with an attacking approach. Our supporters do not understand soccer any other way.
Many of the players had an attacking approach in that generation. Emilio was a forward and I was a forward too. Martin Vasquez was a midfielder, Michel was a midfielder, and the only one who wasn't playing in the attacking area was Sanchez, but he scored goals too.
We also have to say about the Quinta del Buitre that we had a great luck learning from extraordinary veterans. At the time, 3 players were signed up that became very important for us. There was Gordillo, a Spanish international at the time, Tony Makeda, and Hugo Sanchez, an extraordinary Mexican.
Sanchez was, you know, your classic kind of Latin male. He was Mexican, but he was the macho, who played the kind of football that the sort of traditional Real Madrid fans like. He was responsible for Real Madrid setting a record for the most goals ever scored, Liga goals scored in a season.
Real Madrid and the Magnificent 5 secured a collection of trophies, but more impressively, won 5 Spanish league titles in a row.
It was a milestone that was only achieved 2 times in the history of the league, also by Real Madrid in the late 50s and 60s. Of course, it gave us great pride and joy.
Undoubtedly, it is not easy to stay on top for 5 years in such a competitive league like the Spanish, dominating the league in a very clear way. To do it was marked like limestone and undoubtedly became one of the most admired eras.
London's Wembley Stadium has witnessed many memorable moments, but few greater shocks than the 1988 FA Cup final. Liverpool, arguably one of the greatest club teams of the decade, were aiming to win another league and cup double. Standing in their way, the brute force of Wimbledon and its crazy gang.
With Wimbledon, if you came off the field not having a bruise or 2, or you've been hiding.
Tackles used to fly in.
That was a nasty challenge by Vinnie Jones.
We were notorious, and if you weren't prepared to take on Mike Tyson, don't turn up, because we're going to come out blazing at you. And that was the only way that we knew.
Liverpool may have had the skill and the history, but Wimbledon had their own secret weapon, Vinnie Jones.
I think Vinnie Jones was one of the best things about the 80s. I think there was, people used to say to me, he was a pantomime villain, and football needs that.
I think that's what they miss when I speak to fans now, that we don't kind of add that character in the game anymore. Vinnie used to just like a good punch-up or something and get it over with,
He was an intelligent player who made maximum use of the skills he had.
Vinnie Jones, Gascoigne's nuts. Turn around to him and said, listen to me, fat boy, you wait there, I'll be back for you in a minute. Gazza gave me a bit of verbals, and I just reached behind me and grabbed him by the nuts, and he got the picture.
And the crazy gang certainly weren't going to let Liverpool's reputation faze them.
They were playing at Wembley, a team that's won 4 European Cups. You know, it did, on the face of it, look like a mismatch.
Liverpool, Wimbledon, said it's the crazy gang meets the culture club. Liverpool dominated the 80s. Basically, we were a team of misfits, really. I was on £150 a week. But that didn't worry us. I mean, the team spirit came because it was David against Goliath every game for us, you know, and we were up for it, and we were like, if you're going to beat us, we're going to make sure you're going to earn it.
And it didn't take long for the crazy gang and Vinnie Jones to leave their mark.
That was a nasty challenge by Vinnie Jones.
He kicked Steve McMahon right at the top of the tie and really whacked him. You know, they let Liverpool know they were there.
You know, you're in the passion of a cup final, and, you know, these things happen.
They let them know it wasn't going to be easy. And, you know, they had enough ability then, once Liverpool got slightly distracted, to play football with them.
And the plan seemed to be working, as Wimbledon took a shock lead.
And it's in there!
Laurie Sanchez comes in, flicks it. I'm caught in no man's land.
And I just see it hit the net, and it was disbelief. I think we was more surprised when the goal went in than they were. You know, we were just making an account of ourselves and never really dreamt that we'd score. And I think from that moment on, it was like, we had 20 players then. You're not going to get through us now, boys.
But in the second half, it looked like Wimbledon's dream was about to end.
We get a penalty. Yeah! Aldridge has never ever missed a penalty. Do you know what I mean? Hold on. There's a first time for everything, isn't there?
I happened to be in the Wimbledon end that day, and Aldridge was facing, he put the ball down. As he put the ball down, he looked up, and you could see he was white. I just thought, oh.
Saved brilliantly by Besant.
It wasn't a bad penalty, you know, and the keeper, Besant's made a great save.
It shouldn't happen to a Scouser. No one's ever missed a penalty at Wembley before.
If we had scored the penalty, the whole game would have been different.
Finish it off, and somehow or other, Wimbledon survived.
But it was like miss after miss after miss.
It's a good cross by him. There is the final whistle.
Just to hear that final whistle, it was just, you know, you really did sort of think you was in a dream.
You know what was brilliant about seeing Wimbledon win is that this was a team of lesser talents who were greater than the sum of the parts. I think that's one of the greatest things in football.
And Big Dave Besant lifts the cup for Wimbledon.
Coming up, Italy break Brazilian hearts.
I think the football as a whole was shell-shocked, and I think football lost a bit of the beauty.
And a German goalkeeper breaks a whole lot more.
It looks like a stretcher job.
It's engraved in my mind with acid.
Our next great footballing moment of the 80s takes place in 1982. Brazil arrived at the World Cup finals in Spain with a squad that many believed to be the greatest of the decade. But they would leave defeated in one of the greatest World Cup showdowns in history.
For my money, the 82 Brazil team in my lifetime is the greatest football team, the greatest national team I have ever seen, alongside Spain of the last few years. Falcao, Socrates, Eder, Zico.
Now, I like to joke that in my house, Christmas is on the 3rd of March, the day Zico was born. At that age, I was already in awe about what Zico did. I think I loved Zico more than I loved my dad.
They were gods, they are gods.
With such an array of breathtaking talent, the South Americans were favourites to lift the trophy for the 4th time in their history. But first, they had to find a way past the Italians and their star striker, Paolo Rossi.
People were talking before that game, there's no way we're going to lose to these guys. Brazil had always had the best of Italy. How the hell are they going to beat us?
Blows his whistle, away we go.
The Italians thought, right, you know what you're not going to do? You're not going to dance past us. You're not going to pass the ball past us. We're going to mount a challenge.
Let's look at that game. They start, bad marking, boom, Rossi scores.
Useful looking cross. It's 1-0. Italy. Rossi.
Then Brazil goes forward, equalizes Socrates.
Stuck with Zico. Didn't he do well? Socrates. Oh, it's 1-1. And what a goal. Socrates.
What they call tap-tap football. Bang, bang. Quick pass and move. They must have learned it on the beach, Copacabana Beach for sure.
And then Rossi scores again to make it 2-1.
It's been given away. Here's Rossi. Oh, it could be a calamitous mistake.
Boom, boom, boom. 2-2.
Teresa's running up alongside him. So is Falcao, who's here. Falcao trying to set himself up for the shot. Oh, screamer!
In the 74th minute, Rossi completed his amazing hat-trick to win the game for the Italians.
He was a natural goal scorer. Apart from being a great finisher, his anticipation, you're most probably a second or two quicker than the defenders.
Look at the third goal. There's a Brazilian guy standing on the goal line after a corner, playing Rossi on. So that's the kind of tragic beauty. They were brilliant going forward, but they defended like buffoons sometimes.
Italy 3, Brazil 2. Brazil are beaten.
One of the most dramatic and, I think, emotional victories the Italian national team has ever had.
Rossi definitely the destroyer of Brazil.
After the 1982 World Cup, I think the football as a whole was shell-shocked, and I think football lost a bit of the beauty.
Brazil went home. Although they would go on and reclaim their World Cup crown in later years, the shock of the 1982 defeat is still being felt today.
But 82 was the last great Brazil team as the ideal of Brazil, right? The oft-mentioned stereotype of the Brazilian players being superbly skilled.
What I regret a lot about that game was football became a bit more boring, even in Brazil. I think, okay, we can't play like that. See what happened? We had a great team, we had great football, bam, we lost the World Cup.
They thought we need to be more like the Europeans. Brazil changed after that.
It's all over. It's one of the great victories of World Cup history.
Next, one of the most shocking moments in football history. France are playing West Germany in the 1982 World Cup semi-final. With the two great European rivals fighting for a place in the final, the game was to become infamous for one of the worst tackles ever seen.
It's imprinted with such force. It's engraved in my mind with acid.
The game was evenly poised at 1-1. When in the second half, France's Michel Platini sent defender Patrick Battiston through on goal. All that stood between him and glory was the West German keeper, Harald Schumacher.
Schumacher didn't tackle Battiston, he flattened Battiston.
Battiston has gone through, he's beaten the offside track, the ball has bounced between him and Schumacher. Schumacher just came out and just scythed him down.
Great ball for Battiston!
Tony Schumacher, he was a very aggressive goalkeeper that took no prisoners.
The goalkeeper, I think he had a big old tash and long curly hair, I think, and just come running over and literally jumped as if he was in the Grand National to go over one of the fences.
He wasn't nowhere near the ball.
And it looks like a stretcher job.
His version of events was the momentum was such that a collision was unavoidable.
Battiston, I believe, broke a couple of vertebrae, lost his front teeth.
That was one of the worst tackles you've ever seen.
Worst tackle in history? One of the worst tackles, yes.
What incensed the French even more was the referee didn't even give a foul.
My face and that face of my father, who I was watching, must have resembled that of Michel Hidalgo's. Just going, what's going on here?
Unfortunately, in sports, and especially football, bad tackles happen. In that very moment when it happens, it's just so fast that you can't accuse a player of planning that tackle. but it was a bad tackle. So I think he's the first one to realize that, and it's the first one to apologize for it.
It was totally ridiculous. If that goalkeeper would have come out and done that, we'd have all gone over. It'd have been a mass brawl, without a shadow of a doubt.
And while he's lying there, you know, helpless, he's sort of waving his arm to try to get on with the game, you know, I think you couldn't come up with a worse villain. And I just had to look at Schumacher, you know, the hair, the mustache, you know. And I felt a bit of sympathy for him as well. You know, you could see the adrenaline. He says, you know, I didn't mean to hurt you. You got in my way. But again, because Schumacher is German, nobody gave him the benefit of the doubt, and he became sort of this great, you know, satanic figure.
Battiston was carried off the pitch, taking France's hopes of victory with him.
I remember Michel Platini taking Patrick Battiston by the hand on the stretcher when they were going. It's an image that's absolutely one of the most awful images I've ever seen.
To rub salt in France's and Battiston's wounds, Germany went on to win the semi-final in a penalty shootout.
Unfortunately, in football, not always the right team wins. We were all ashamed to have beaten France like that.
If this game was played in heaven, there would only be one winner. There would only be one team sitting to the right of the Father, if you see what I mean. It wouldn't be the Germans.
For many supporters, a sort of justice was provided in the final, as West Germany were defeated by Italy.
Apart from a couple of Germans, I think the whole world wanted Italy to win, and they got right.
Harold Schumacher, the face of defeat.
I was absolutely delighted. Sweet revenge. Justice done.
It's not just the players that are guilty of getting overexcited, as TV viewers in Norway discovered in 1981. The national team, made up of a squad of part-timers, had just pulled off a shock 2-1 win against England in a World Cup qualifying game.
The Norwegian team had only 5 professionals, the rest were amateur players.
And we got beat by Norway. You have to leave a little gap after you say that. Back then, it was an unbelievable thing.
I don't think anybody expected it, at least of all the England players, the England coaching staff. Certainly not as supporters would have expected it.
It was an amazing result, but not as strange as what followed, from commentator Bjørge Lillian.
I think he got a little bit overexcited.
Vi har slått England! England! Kjempers fødeland!
He burbled on for ages with all sorts of pseudo-historic references.
Lord Nelson! Lord Beaverbrook! Clement Attlee!
And Clement Attlee? Where have you got Clement Attlee from?
Sir Winston Churchill!
Mr. Churchill! Mr. Churchill, wake up! Wake up! You have lost! You have been beaten! You have been crushed!
Sir Anthony Eden!
I think Anthony Eden, mate. And I think, wait a minute, mate, we're not sure who Anthony Eden is.
Henry Cooper! Lady Diana!
Wake up, Diana! Diana, you have lost!
Maggie Thatcher! Can you hear me? Maggie Thatcher! Your boys took a hell of a beating! Your boys took a hell of a beating!
I think if it was an England commentator, I don't even think we wouldn't have named any Norwegians. We'd have had to go to Sweden and start talking about ABBA.
If I had to have the rant against the Norwegians, King Olaf I'd have done King Olaf. Edvard Munch, would you? Yeah, you'd have gone Munch eventually.
Your boys took a hell of a beating!
It became legend, and to give our nation its due, became a huge success in this country. We thought it was hilarious.
Coming up, France and its captain create Euro history.
You find every now and again a player that starts doing things that you never seen anybody doing before.
And how an Englishman beat the Brazilians at their own game.
I remember my father getting home, turn on the telly. Something special happened in America now.
For our next greatest football moment of the 1980s, we move to Italy for one of the most dramatic European Cup shootouts in history. In the 80s, the Italian domestic league was considered the strongest in the world, with players like Platini, Maradona and Zico all gracing its stage. So when Roma played Liverpool in the 1984 European Cup final, at their home ground, the intimidating Olympic Stadium, it was a chance to finally demonstrate the Italian supremacy.
The build-up to that game was beautiful. You going into Rome to play against Roma in the Olympic Stadium, and you think, wow, this is like the gladiator going into the Colosseum.
And what better opponents than Liverpool, you know, the benchmark of that era.
Now 85% most probably Roma fans. It was daunting, again, but we all stuck together.
And Liverpool soon drew first blood.
Phil Neal gets a goal, you know, it was absolutely incredible, and from then on, really, you know, you're thinking, do we hold on to this?
But the Italians struck back.
Defender crossed in once more, flicked on again.
Pruzzo scored there, a bad goal from Liverpool's point of view. They let themselves down, and then the second half just sort of meandered to extra time and the penalties.
And the 5 penalty takers will be nominated.
For the first time in history, the final of the European Cup will be settled by a penalty shootout. Liverpool took theirs first, and Stevie Nicol blasted it over the top.
It was into the Roma end, and they celebrated more wildly than they celebrated their goal. They thought the European Cup was theirs.
First penalty went down the middle, got my hand to it, and I thought, well, okay, we're 1-0 down.
So now Liverpool have got a huge problem.
Liverpool need a save. Or a Conti miss.
Fortunately for Liverpool, the atmosphere was getting to Roma players too.
And they've got a Conti miss.
So all of a sudden it was game on. And
people ask me, well, what's the most nervous you've been in a game? You got like 80,000 people whistling at you and everything. You put the ball down and you're waiting for the referee's whistle to go.
Rush buried his penalty, leaving Roma and Graziani to face Grobbelaar to keep his team in the game.
Just before he put the ball down, he kissed the ball, put it down, and he crossed himself. And that's when I thought, oh, come in with this little wobbly legs.
You know, my first thought was, what the hell's wrong with him?
I thought that he'd lost it. You know what I mean? I thought that his nerve had gone. Do you know what I mean? I didn't know he was a psychological game that he was playing. I think that's genius.
In that era, the rule was the goalkeeper could not move his feet until the ball was kicked. Well, if you have a look at that, I never.
And then, of course, Graziani misses. You know, he was put off by it.
Missed it!
With that miss, Liverpool just needed to score their final penalty to win the cup.
Liverpool are European champions!
In the end, God was a Scouser once again.
It's well done, Liverpool.
(1984) now, and the European Championship finals in France, scene of one of the greatest displays of individual footballing brilliance. The French had so far failed to win a single major competition. The tournament was an opportunity for the team and their talismanic captain, Michel Platini, to prove they had finally arrived on the world stage.
You've got this team, evolving towards what we call le carré magique, the magical quartet. It's basically Michel Platini and 3 others.
The great controversy, of course, when I was growing up was, what's his name? Is it Platini or is it Platini? Because I grew up with Platini, and that was his name, Michael Platini.
The French make a positive start to the tournament, with Platini scoring 2 consecutive hat-tricks in victories over Belgium and Yugoslavia.
And he scores a royal hat-trick as well, left foot, right foot, header.
You find every now and again a player that gives a new step into football, starts doing things that you never seen anybody doing before.
Well, Platini, to me, was one of the all-time greats. He's a goal scorer from midfield, which is always tremendous, from free kicks, but also from open play. But he was also a terrific passer. And he was a leader as well.
Portugal await in the semi-final. A 3-2 victory in one of the greatest games of the decade, with Platini once more pulling the strings.
this incredible game against Portugal, and Jean Tigana drawing every single ounce of energy he had left, and where he found it, I don't know.
Still Tigana. Can he pull it back?
But who is there to finish it?
He plays with an ease, with a grace, and he just scores so many goals from a deep-lying position. It's just not supposed to happen.
All that stands between France and the history books is Spain in the final. And Platini is on hand again to write the final chapter, with a little help from the goalkeeper.
Poor Arconada, who is one of the best goalkeepers in the history of Spanish football, just allowed it to go through his arms.
A 2-0 victory, and the French are champions. Their peerless midfield has orchestrated a wonderful victory, with Platini their conductor.
He's the only player in the history of the European Championships to have scored consecutive hat-tricks.
For me, without a doubt, the greatest player we had in our history.
We travel to South America now in 1984, where England are playing a friendly match against the mighty Brazil in their home stadium, the Maracanã.
Our church was football. My cathedral was the Maracanã. We were born in a country that called itself the best football country in the world. We like to say the English invented it and we made it better.
But in that game, it was an Englishman who brought the stadium to life with his silky samba skills, as John Barnes, then playing for Watford, scored one of the greatest goals of all time.
Brazil 84. What a memory, man.
It's a good ball there for Barnes. Now can he take Leandro? John Barnes now. Might go all the way for England. Barnes!
It's got to be up there with the great goals England have scored. I mean, given the opposition, given the stage it was on, I think it is one of the most brilliant goals you could see.
You know, this guy out of the blue lights up the Maracanã. That was unbelievable. People just got shell-shocked by the brilliance of the whole thing. I remember my father getting home, turn on the telly, something special happened in the Maracanã. And we sat down and watched that, and I just remember him being like, oh God.
When he picked up that ball in Brazil, they were foolish. The Brazilians backed off him, and they didn't realise what a burst of acceleration he had.
He went through 5, 6 players, plus he just tapped it in.
We thought it could be one of us on that day. As a Liverpool fan, I would love to say that to him one day.
A Mark Hateley goal sealed the 2-0 victory for England, but the game was all about John Barnes. And when he was later signed by Liverpool, Barnes's career for club and country held an even deeper significance for many supporters in the 1980s.
When Liverpool decided that they were going to pick up John Barnes, a black player, all of a sudden now, I wasn't a supporter anymore, just watching the game. I was a supporter who was on the pitch playing the game, because I was now being represented.
Coming up, one man's right foot stuns the world.
It was absolutely amazing, and I think that says everything about Michael van Basten, pure quality.
And how one game helped change the face of football forever.
Thomas, it's up for grabs now! Thomas!
Probably the moments that you can see quite clearly where football will go in the 20 years afterwards.
We move now to the 1988 European Championships for our next greatest football moments of the 80s. A tournament lit up by one of the greatest goals ever scored by one of the greatest players of the decade.
Van Buren played a lovely early ball in towards Van Basten. Oh! Tremendous goal by the Dutch striker.
I think Michael van Basten's most probably the best number 9 has been.
He just could do anything. He was this big, tall guy who had this incredible grace. You know, they used to call him the Swan. Rarely had you seen somebody so big, but so light on his feet, with such a delicate touch.
You know, he had everything that you needed, coolness, a little bit of, arrogance, great ability, and obviously, he was playing in a great Dutch team.
The Soviet Union awaited in the final, and Van Basten helped lead his team to victory with a goal that will be remembered to this day.
Zavrov for the Russians is intercepted in midfield by Van Tiegelen. And he sweeps it out left to Murim.
Ball sailed over from the left, and from a very narrow and difficult angle, he unleashed a blanking rocket. Unstoppable. Into the far left top corner, and there was very little angle to get it there at all. It was right-footed volley, and it was an amazing goal.
I think any keeper in the world wouldn't even think he's going to have a shot from there.
It was unstoppable. You know, the pace beat the goalkeeper, but it went in so quick he could hardly see it.
It was absolutely amazing, and I think that says everything about Michael van Basten, pure quality.
Van Basten's goals had delivered the Dutch team's first major tournament win.
One of the finest forwards ever to play this game.
For our next great footballing moment, we move to Spain. Today, Barcelona is one of the biggest clubs in the world. But in the 1980s, it was their great rivals, Real Madrid, who were dominating the league. The moment that was to help change the Catalan giants' destiny was the arrival of former player Johan Cruyff, returning to the Nou Camp in 1988, this time as manager. As a player, Cruyff was famous for his fluid and attacking style, something he was keen to replicate as Barcelona's manager.
Cruyff obviously comes, in footballing terms, from the star of Ajax and also the star of the Dutch national team, both of whom were players of fantastic football, total footballers it came to be known.
Their whole football ideology was they could play in any position.
You had a sort of choreography on the pitch, and I think he created that with Barcelona. Cruyff revives Barca and transforms the way that Barca play. He created the so-called dream team.
The likes of Chique Begiristain or Vaquero, and of course Laudrup and Stoichkov. And you put to that as well the 3-4-3 idea of the dream team, where everything was about attacking. And the rest is history. It was a wonderful period in European football.
Cruyff's first significant victory with his developing dream team came in the European Cup Winners' Cup in 1989, before finally delivering the ultimate prize, the European Cup in 1992.
You talk to any Barca fan, that takes on historical proportions. It's Barca entering the big league there, you know.
Barcelona's way is not just Cruyff's way, but Cruyff gave a very big jump in terms of confidence in what they were doing and also in the way they were doing it. And Pep Guardiola just got a little bit of everything from all of his learnings from Johan Cruyff, all his learnings of being a Barcelona fan and a Barcelona player, and then just gave an extra push to Barcelona.
You watch that dream team, you see the precursor there of the Barca that a lot of us now love to watch these days. You can trace back to the total football of the Dutch.
We now move to May 1989 and Anfield, Liverpool, scene of one of the most dramatic games of the decade. Arguably the greatest club team of the 1980s, Liverpool faced rivals Arsenal in the last game of the English season. Arsenal needed to win by 2 goals to secure the title. Anything less, and the trophy would remain at Anfield.
Liverpool had to not lose 2-0. That was all they had to do.
It looked a relatively routine thing to do against an Arsenal team that was just maturing.
If you look at the Arsenal, I don't think you will have many big names of players who would be thought as truly great players of the English game in that particular lineup.
Most probably we thought we'd won before we kicked off, really, because there's no way Arsenal going to score 2 goals against Liverpool at Anfield.
No, it's not going to happen, is it?
But it seemed the long season, which included the horrific Hillsborough tragedy that had cost the lives of 96 Liverpool supporters, was beginning to affect the mighty Reds.
It was a very difficult time the weeks before the Arsenal game. Hillsborough happened on the 15th of April, and the city, the fans, and the Liverpool team were all in a complete daze, and we're in a state of shock.
So instead of a positive feel going out into the pitch, we were in like a limbo.
There was nothing about the game that made you think, I think Arsenal could win this.
First half, 0-0. We're doing okay. 2 minutes into the second half, they get a free kick.
Has made a darting little run in there, and Smith!
It squeezes in the post.
The Liverpool players are surrounding the referee.
I think it was symptomatic of the mindset of them. Instead of realising that it was more a problem with bad marking and ball watching, there was a bit of blame thrown going on.
I was convinced, they weren't going to score another one.
1 minute to go.
John Barnes goes to the right-hand side in the corner. That's it. Stay there, John. That'll do. Waste some time over that side. And then I look over and I said, what are you doing?
But Barnes will not be denied. Yes, he will, by Richardson, moment ago, down and injured.
Lukic grabs the ball, rolls it out to Bold. Bold goes, thank you very much, over the top.
With just seconds to go, and Arsenal needing a goal, the moment came.
Alan Hansen goes, oh my goodness. I'm going, should I come or should I stay?
It's one of those times when it's almost in slow motion, and you see him, you sort of go into the goal and you think, no.
And then Mickey Thomas does something that a lot of people can't understand how he did it.
But Thomas charging through the midfield. Thomas, it's up for grabs now. Thomas.
The ball, as it went in, it bobbled. It hit Bruce underneath and sort of bobbles up, and you think, they'll catch you.
He had to try and get his toe underneath the ball to lift it over my leg side. And he did it. Genius by Mickey Thomas. And that's how we lost it.
He kind of fell over and rolled a little bit like that. It was like one of them cartwheels fat girls used to do in the playground. Sorry.
An unbelievable climax to the league season. Well into injury time, the Liverpool players are down absolutely abject.
It was the biggest hold-up in the history of English football.
Just remember there being complete, not a shock and silence. And then a voice behind said, you know what? Worse things happen. We know. And the funny thing was, that was the moment all the tension over Hillsborough in many ways broke. It was, it sort of almost felt like a cloud had lifted. We got beat, but it didn't matter. It was just football.
A momentous occasion this for Arsenal.
Arsenal were champions. And for Liverpool, perhaps the greatest club team of the 80s, it was to signal the beginning of the end of their footballing dominance.
So I think psychologically, I think it hurt Liverpool, that defeat. And look where we are now. Have they really recovered? They've not really dominated since, have they?
Liverpool, its team and its supporters would have to watch as Manchester United would become the new force in British football.
Alex Ferguson blossomed into a great manager, and United created a period of dominance. They built up the stadium, they got more fans in there, they got more revenue, they looked at the merchandising and how they could improve it. Liverpool sat there and assumed that things would stay as they always were, and they changed out of all recognition.
The 1989 Liverpool-Arsenal game shown live on TV also had a wider legacy, helping usher in a new era of global sporting coverage, revolutionising the face of the beautiful game forever.
It was a huge event. It gave the television companies a taste of what live football, the effect of live football could have. It's probably the moment that you can see quite clearly where football will go in the 20 years afterwards and how it will leave behind what came before it.